There's a great social account called the Dodo that focuses on pet stuff. And there's both positive and negative. There's an account that I think is amazing. This woman created an account around her dog called Tucker Budson, and she gives her dog a voice. And people will say, well, it's a cute dog, so that's why it's getting it. You know how many dog accounts there are on social media? There are millions. And I recommend checking her content out because she's mastered every single platform. She has Facebook working, YouTube working, Instagram working, TikTok working at the highest levels. And that's a positive message. It's fun. It's uplifting. So I don't look at it from the standpoint of, does it have to be negative or positive? I think you can play both sides. It's really is what is going to generate that pattern interruption and bring people into the story.
Welcome to the Viral by Design podcast with Dave Rotherow, where we get inside the minds of today's leading viral marketers as they reveal the exact strategies they use to build brands, products, and campaigns that are magnetic to customers, spread like wildfire, and seize the attention of millions. This is Viral by Design.
So, welcome to another episode of Viral by Design. I'm extremely excited to welcome today's guest. He's the man famous for generating 1 million social media followers in just 30 days. He documented exactly how he did it in his book, 1 Million Followers. More recently, he penned Hook Points, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World, which focuses on getting attention and cutting through the noise on social media. He's built platforms for celebrity clients like Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Exhibit, and many more. He's also worked for companies like MGM, Lionsgate, Sony, Yahoo, MTV, and he's cracked the code on growing colossal social media followings, which will help you grow your business and your brand. And also, he's about to drop all of his secrets. So, Brendan, thank you so much for being here, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that's listening to this.
Absolutely, man. So, some people obviously really clearly struggle to grow their following on social media, to get the attention. They try for years on end and they post hundreds of posts, thousands of videos on YouTube, and they just don't get that traction. Clearly, what you're actually doing is completely different. So what is that point of differentiation, if you could sum it up?
Yeah, so if you want to be successful in social media, really what it comes down to is two things. It's very simple, the two things, but it's not necessarily easy to do. So the two things are, can you get people to stop? Just stop the scroll in terms of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. Can you get the scrolling to stop? Because if you can't, then they're scrolling past and they're never going to get to your core message, your story, or whatever it may be. And then it comes down to the second thing is once you get somebody to stop, how long can you hold that attention for? You have to have both of those things mastered in order to be successful. And the reason why is because we live in a world where there's over 60 billion messages sent out on digital platforms each day. And what that means is the algorithms, and people have heard that term thrown around, it's basically the thing that is designed to drive their business model. And the business model of all these platforms is predicated on the fact of how long can we make individuals stay on these platforms. So what the algorithms have to do, they have to prioritize what is the content that's going to get people to stop and hold people's attention for the longest period of time. So if we were to open up Instagram right now, each one of us, individually, there's probably 1,000 pieces of content that could be seeded to us based on all the people that we follow, all the content we've engaged with. Now, obviously, you can't seed 1,000 pieces of content when somebody opens up the app. It'd be so overwhelming. So the algorithms have a very tough job. They have to determine, okay, what are the top 10 or 15 posts that I'm going to prioritize for this individual person that has the best chance to keep them on the platform longer. So what that really means is out of 1,000 pieces of content created by all these different creators, 985 are being deprioritized and not even reaching the audience that you built. So that's where you'll see people either struggling to gain traction in generating followers because the algorithms aren't sharing it with more people than are following them. In addition, for the people that already have amassed a large following, whether that's 50,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, if they have low engagement or low view numbers, it's not because that it's fake followers. It's not because that it's an unengaged audience. It's simply that the algorithms have deemed that there's better content out there to keep people on the platform longer. So again, just to recap, the only two things you need to master is how to stop the scroll, or in the case of YouTube, how do you win the click in suggested video? And then how long can you hold their attention for?
Absolutely, man. So, what it always comes back to is the human psychology, right? And I think so many people get stuck in this idea that it's the mechanics of it. You need to churn out more content. It needs to be more content, different ways, split it up into so many different things, and try and, I think, get too methodical about it, right? But what I love about your work is that you really break it back down to the fundamental psychology of like pattern interrupts and getting people's attention and appealing to that lizard brain. So how would you say that people can really construct a great pattern interrupt? We start with, I guess, more on the kind of hook point side of things. How do people actually stop the scroll?
Well, the first place to start is studying. But this is the amazing thing that nobody does, is they just create content. They don't look at references, both high performers and low performers, and really study, well, how are they generating engagement? Or even lack thereof. Like even the top content creators, we'll look at their highest performing videos or images, and we'll also look at their lowest performing images or videos. So that's the first place to start. You have to become a student of the game. Like you said, most of the information out there is outdated. It's from 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that just says the way to win the game is consistency, create as much content as possible, put it out there, use hashtags, all of those things. Did that work at a point in a period of time? Yes. Are there some content creators that are able to scale that way? Yes, but those content creators have mastered the two things that we covered. So number one is focus on what other people are doing. Secondarily, when you mention pattern interrupt, and that's something that we talk about a lot, you've got to recognize the pattern, because how can you disrupt the pattern if you don't know what the pattern is? So it's one of the exercises we say is, you can do this with any content creator. Just open up your Instagram app or Facebook or whatever platform you're focusing on, and just scroll through and start noticing the patterns and figure out, well, what would disrupt this pattern to get somebody to stop? So that's one way to think about it. Another analogy that I like to play is just imagine you just an individual, your end user that you're trying to attract, the consumer you're trying to attract, just watched a Netflix trailer, and they watched LeBron James dunk a basketball. They watched Kevin Hart tell a joke. Now your content comes up. That's what you're competing against. So how do you stop that? So now that we have that foundation, we can talk about different tools of how to actually do that. And when we talk about hook point, some people think, well, it's just copy. Copy can be one of them, like meme cards that you see in the top of videos can be one way to stop the scroll. Just because you have a meme card, though, doesn't mean you're going to get somebody to stop, because everybody's doing it. So it can be the text. It can be the visual. It could be the cadence or tone, like Prince EA that wrote the foreword for my first book. He's a master of hook points through his performance, through his cadence and tone of his content and his message. Now, one tool just to kind of express it a little bit further, and I'm not saying you use this all the time, we use it selectively, but it's a good expression of how to stop the scroll, it's called subverting expectations. How do you flip something completely on its head? So for example, we had one video that went viral where the text, the meme card on the top said, "Warning," in all caps with exclamation points, "Safety is dangerous." So that flips a held-known assumption that safety keeps you safe. But by us flipping it, it gets the scroll to stop. And then we go into the story we want to tell about that. Because the big thing is, we're not talking about clickbait here. Because again, what we talked about in the beginning is stopping the scroll is just one part of the equation. The second part is you have to hold that attention, where clickbait falls apart is people feel that they're tricked, or the information or story doesn't match up, and then they move on. So that's one example. There was another one that we said that there was the inspirational advice, don't sweat the small stuff. So again, we subverted expectations, flipped it on its head, and sweat the small stuff. So that's one part of really generating that pattern interruption, or one element of it.
Yeah. That's huge, man. That's really, really insightful information. I know one thing that works really well, and because we as humans are naturally more predisposed to be responsive to negative information, right? To avoid pain, avoid negative situations. So obviously negative headlines, we find a lot of the time the advertising that we do work far more effectively. Is that something you found, or you found that, there's more effective stuff than that?
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, it's less about positive versus negative and just more about what's going to capture people's attention, because you will see like Prince EA, like he's a master at inspirational content. Jay Shetty is too, and they play both sides. They play both the negative, they play both the positive. There's the World Economic Forum is an amazing social account where they play that line on both sides and feature interesting stories. There's a great social account called the Dodo that focuses on pet stuff, and there's both positive and negative. There's an account that I think is amazing. This woman created an account around her dog called Tucker Budson, and she gives her dog a voice. And people will say, "Well, it's a cute dog, so that's why it's getting it." You know how many dog accounts there are on social media? There are millions, and I recommend checking her content out because she's mastered every single platform. She has Facebook working, YouTube working, Instagram working, TikTok working at the highest levels. And that's a positive message. It's fun. It's uplifting. So I don't look at it from the standpoint of, does it have to be negative or positive? I think you can play both sides. It's really is what is going to generate that pattern interruption and bring people into the story.
Got it. That's great. So then I guess moving on from, stopping the scroll and grabbing people's attention, then what you said about holding people's attention and storytelling. Obviously, stories are how we've learned to learn since we're little children. It's how we take on information best. First of all, how can we tell a story about a brand, for example? And secondly as well, kind of Paul beats that question, how does that translate into a sale?
Well, how does it translate into a sale is how can you make a sale without getting somebody to stop? You can't get to a sale. So I would say there's three core pillars to a successful hook point. And we've talked about two of them. So first is the pattern interruption. How do you get somebody to stop? Then the second core pillar is the story. How do you hold their attention for a long period of time so you maximize that reach from organic with the algorithms, and even the auctions. The auctions measure this stuff too, because the feeds are the holy grail, and they don't want to push content out that's not really generating engagement. So yeah, you can put out a poorly performing story or pattern interrupt and still advertise it, but you're going to get ringed in the auction. You're going to have to pay a much higher rate. So again, just to recap, pattern interruption, effective story to hold attention. And the third is, do people trust what you have to say? Do people have to believe in it? And all three have to play in together, because if you don't stop the scroll, you don't generate the pattern interruption, you never get to the story. If you generate a pattern interruption, but your story is no good, then you've lost that attention. If you have a great pattern interruption, your story is good, but people don't believe it, then it doesn't fall apart. So that's where, when you look about making a sale, either organically or looking at it from a paid advertising perspective, those are the three core pillars that we really pay attention to drive brand growth, to drive and lower cost per acquisition, or increase return on ad spend, increase lifetime value.
Got it. Now you mentioned a few different platforms there. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's threats to Facebook to be broken up. There's new platforms coming into the marketplace. There's the fact that younger people don't seem to be on Facebook, whereas they are on Instagram or they are on other platforms. How do you see the future of Facebook itself and Instagram? What do you think of these new platforms that are coming out, things like TikTok?
Yeah, my personal opinion is there's a lot of misinformation in the media. There's a lot of conflation about stories that probably are not going to happen. I'm not going to say they're all untrue. A lot of it is speculation or people sharing their opinions, and sure, some of it may be true. Like I try and focus on the things that I can control. To me, do I think Facebook is going to get broken up? Probably not, but I'm not a specialist in regulations and all of that. I just choose to operate under the assumption that Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger are always going to be together. There's so many antitrust lawsuits that have gone against Google. And the fact is, these companies have made so much money that they have the best lawyers, they have the best lobbyists and all of that. And is there, like when you talk about Facebook and younger kids being on Facebook, I think what is misunderstood is, hey, there's over 2 billion people on the platform. And everybody, especially talks about these social medias like of USA numbers or the UK, when Facebook is a global company and that is their focus. Have a significant percentage of the younger demo adopted TikTok or Instagram? Sure. But that doesn't mean they're still not on Facebook. And with Instagram, and obviously Facebook owns Instagram, I never put anything past them. They are wicked smart. They took out Snapchat, and not on the first try. They are resilient and they will find an answer to compete at that level. And you see it happening with TikTok. Like, the interesting things that they're doing is they released Reels. You can also see if people take a TikTok video and upload it to Instagram, it gets more reach. So they're actively testing and learning what's going to happen. Now, does that mean that TikTok's going to die? No. Does that mean that Instagram's going to die? No, I don't think so. In terms of other startup apps, I honestly don't pay attention unless it hits like 500 to 750 million users. Not to say that there's not potential, but for me, it's like focus of time, because you can't conquer and be great at every platform. There's very few examples of doing it. Again, are there examples? Like we covered Tucker's, the dog account. Yeah, she's mastered that, but there's so few and far between that can do that. So to me, it's really focusing on one, get really good at, master it, and then move on to others.
Yeah.
But that's just my philosophy. Other people have different philosophies, and to me, it's choose the right path for yourself.
100%. No, it makes sense, man. One thing I'm really curious to know from you, because obviously, you master the frameworks and you're clearly a very methodical guy as well. And that's enabled you to not just grow to 1 million followers in 30 days, but also to be able to document it into a book, which is fantastic. Anyone reading, go and check that out for sure. 1 million followers, the name of the book. In terms of overlaying creative ideas onto those frameworks, I'm really curious to understand how you go about getting creative ideas. Now, I myself find that I'll set an intention at the start of the week to have a creative idea for a client. And then like 7 or 8 days later, I'll be walking down by the lake and suddenly it'll just download into my brain like that. But it's not really a scalable or process driven solution, right? So I'm just curious to hear about your experience coming up with creative ideas.
Yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, when we're consulting for a client and developing hook points for them, it'll happen in our first call. That's just kind of the way that my brain works, and we've trained our team to work that way. Again, it's 9 times out of 10. I'm not going to say every time that happens, but we're generally pretty quick to find it because we dive in deep. Like when I'm working with a client one-on-one, I really get to the core of who they are, how they perceive the world, how they want the world to perceive them. What are their greatest challenges and obstacles? What does their competition look like? What has worked for them in the past? What hasn't worked for them in the past? And I use all of that to guide the creative process in coming up with the best ideas for them. And in some cases, it happens in 15 minutes. Some cases, it happens in 90 minutes. It just depends on the client. But that's typically how we work in the creative process. Sometimes if it's a bigger thing or we've got a lot going on, then we have to revisit it. But that's typically our process when we approach creative ideas.
Got it. Now, you work with some really big fish, the likes of Sony, like huge companies like this, and some celebrity clients as well. Is that what your typical client looks like, or who do you prefer to work with? What kind of businesses do you prefer to work with?
To me, it's not about the size; it's about the mindset. Is this person the right fit for us to work with? Because we work at a pretty advanced level, meaning people are attracted of 1 million followers or scale or growth, which is not an easy thing. The process and the systems are simple, but it takes work. It takes time and takes dedication. So for me, it's really, does this person align with our method of thinking? Is this person really going to take what we guide them with and execute on it and get really good at it? And if it's not, then it's not the right fit. And if that's, a startup or a $1 billion corporation, that's what I look for. Like as you mentioned, like I've worked with some of the biggest corporations, brands, and celebrities on the planet. It's not like I need to do that anymore for case studies or things of that nature. So we're very selective, and I enjoy working with a startup as much as a $1 billion corporation, sometimes more so because they're more open, they're more receptive, they're willing to work harder than working at the highest levels.
Got it. So for anyone listening now, more than likely there'll be a vast amount of smaller startups, people who are really trying to get that traction, who are struggling to get the viewership on social media. Coming into 2021, what would you say would be one habit that they could implement every single day? One thing they could commit to doing for 365 days that would really rocket fuel their growth?
Study every day, even if it's 15 minutes. Or even if you use social media from a personal use perspective, switch your mindset. Instead of just being a passive consumption behavior, start turning into an active consumption behavior. And with each piece of content you engage with, study, why did I engage with it? How did they get me to stop the scroll? How did they earn my click? If it didn't engage you, that's just as important. Why did I scroll past this? Why didn't I engage with it? So I think if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be to start with that.
That's brilliant, man. Going into 2021 for yourself, what are you working on? And also, what are you most excited about in the next 12 months?
Yeah, so we're just super excited of getting the hook point framework out to people because, again, as we were talking, there's really two things that you have to master to be good at social media, and we wrote a whole book on it. The whole book is about how to grab attention and hold attention, and how to do it in a trustworthy way, so you can get people to perform the action that you want them to perform. And so, getting the book into people's hands, and then we built a consulting firm around that, where we actually develop hook points for people that, they don't want to spend the time. They want to cut that learning curve and just get better at it faster, or have us help them, guide them, and develop those hook points for their business or brand.
That's awesome, man. And to get hold of a copy, which incidentally I've read, I got my copy and I've read.
Thank you.
Highly recommend. Where can people go to get a hold of a copy for themselves?
Yeah, so the book is available everywhere. I would recommend going to book.hookpoint.com, because if you get the book, you'll get the physical book plus the audio, and you'll get access to an 1.5-hour free masterclass that dives in a little bit deeper. But again, it's on Audible and Amazon and Target and Walmart and all those stores, Barnes and Noble. So it's everywhere. But if you want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and get more bang for your buck, I would check out book.hookpoint.com.
That's awesome. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for your time, man. You've been really generous with the information that you shared and some absolute golden nuggets that people can implement. So really appreciate it, man.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody listening.
Thanks, brother.
This has been the Viral by Design podcast with Dave Rotherow. For more viral marketing secrets and to get detailed cliff notes on all episodes, visit viralbydesign.net.